You can hack your productivity all day long, but if you're not using that time for what truly matters, what's the point? Here's how to reclaim your time for what really matters most. Dr. Ari Tuckman, PsyD, MBA, is a psychologist, author, international presenter, and ADHD thought leader. His fifth book is the ADHD Productivity Manual. And as we said in those previous episodes, if it can work for people with ADHD, it'll work for everyone. But first, a word from our sponsors. You're listening to Succeed in Medicine, the show for practicing physicians who want to master the parts of their career and life that med school never prepared us for. From interpersonal skills to career navigation to the essential information every physician needs. I'm Dr. Bradley Block, and in every episode, we bring you brass tacks advice and immediately applicable insights from world-class experts, so you can feel prepared wherever your MD takes you and build a life in medicine that's sustainable, rewarding, and actually worth all those years of sacrifice. You've spent years making careful decisions with lasting impact. When it comes to investing, the same principle applies. Lightstone Direct gives you access to institutional quality real estate investments with decades of proven experience behind them. Invest directly, no middlemen, and a $12 billion plus asset under management real estate firm in your corner. Remember, all investments involve risk. Please visit lightstonedirect.com for a full list of disclosures. Dr. Ari Tuckman, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Hey, glad to be here. More than happy to talk about this stuff.
So let's dive right in, because in your book, you talk about this, and I love it because we never really think about it. We're always trying to figure out how to be more productive, but we often don't think about why we should be more productive. So what are some of the big questions that we should be asking ourselves about being more productive before we try and hack our productivity?
Sure. Part of the issue here is, we could all be somewhat more productive, right? And of course, lots of stuff gets marketed to us as making us more productive. So it's easy to sort of slide right into that part of it. How can I be a little bit more efficient or effective? But really the bigger question is, to what end? Just getting more done is theoretically good. It's potentially helpful, but there is a difference between being busy, meaning doing a lot of things, and being productive, meaning doing the right things, and I think especially as a physician where there's so much coming at you, it's really easy to just sort of be reactive and just getting stuff done because there is a lot to get done. But, there is this bigger question of why do I want to be more productive? How does this benefit my life? How does this align with my values? How does this somehow add something meaningful to kind of what matters to me or to the people who matter to me?
Something that we've covered on previous episodes is minimizing wasting time so that you're choosing how, kind of like we might do with our finances. What is important to me? And am I spending money in a way that aligns with that? And I think that's what you're saying. Am I spending time in a way? Because if we're being more productive and we're getting stuff accomplished, but it's just making us crazy, it's not making us any happier, any more fulfilled. I think the term sometimes used is eudaimonia. We've had episodes where we talk about that word that sounds like a skin infection that was on the Spelling Bee episode. But are there any questions that you recommend that we contemplate before we take the dive? How do we sort this out for ourselves?
Yeah. I think the bigger question is, what do I want my life to look like? What if I could sort of create the life I wanted, within the constraints of reality, what would it look like? What am I working towards? How does this thing that I could potentially be doing, how does this contribute to my life in certain ways? But also, because ain't nothing for free, what's it taking away? So even this, right? This is fun. I love doing this stuff. And maybe I'll sell a couple books and make $4. But also I'm not at home, right? I'm not doing other things that I could be doing with this time, right? So there's always a cost to everything we do. And I think a big place that people get in trouble is they look at absolute value and not relative value. So is there some value in doing this thing? Yes, there is. Okay, moving on. But that's not actually the right question, right? The better question is, what's the value of this compared to, relative to what else I could be doing, which is like back to money. You can't spend $1 twice. Did you spend it in the best way, or did you spend it in an okay way that then afterwards you're like, should have done this instead?
Yeah. But how do you do that with time? I mean, it just seems like such an abstract thing. And if I'm not doing this, then there are countless other things I could be doing, right? Like it seems like an impossible equation.
Yeah. And it can feel that way. But I think in some ways, this is where, I don't know, having some clarity about kind of values and priorities is really kind of helpful.
Yeah.
And, there is a saying, your priorities are not what you say, they're what you do.
Yeah.
So if you're like, it's really important to me to take care of my body and stay in shape, and you never actually get to the gym because there's always other things taking over that time, then I don't think that's actually a priority. Like, your actions don't seem to suggest it is. So maybe we need to sort of think about really, really what are your priorities, which might mean, I'm just going to stick with this get to the gym example, but it could be anything. Then what would it take to hold that time sacred? What is not going to get done? And is that a thing of managing sort of the stress within yourself, or getting clear within yourself about what needs to be done? Or is there also maybe an element that like somebody else is not going to be happy that I'm not getting to their stuff? Can I manage their unhappiness? Is that my problem to fix? Do I have the social capital here to say, yeah, sorry, I'm not going to be able to get to that today, right? You also get into the interpersonal part of it as well.
This is a really complicated calculus to make. So how do you use these types of questions and decisions to conceptualize work-life balance, right? That's something that we always talk about in medicine. And it's something that's, as I'm doing more discussions on this topic, is kind of congealing a bit more for me because it's very fluid. We're going to use the baking analogy here, clotting, right? It's kind of coming into focus for me. But how about you? Like, how do you use this to conceptualize work-life balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it absolutely, this is relevant to work-life balance, because as busy professionals, right, there's always more things to do. There's always more opportunities. There's always more people pulling for your time. So that's always going to be the case. And I guess if it isn't, then you got to wonder, like, what do you do? Nobody wants more of your time, but that might be a different episode. So there's always people pulling for you, but there's also then the people at home pulling for you, and your own desire to do things at home and to sort of invest in yourself personally in terms of self-care and, leisure activities and all of that. But just because things are pulling at you doesn't mean it's kind of the thing that you have to do. So really sort of thinking about like, what is worth it to me?
Yeah.
And, if we talk about work-life balance, then, you also get into things like, I would like to work less, or my spouse would like me to work less, and we both agree that would be a good thing. And also we're spending too much money, and financially it's really hard to not have a panic attack every night by working less and not being able to pay the bills or something, right? You know what I mean, right? It's like,
Yeah. Do you have that cushion to not have to worry? Yeah.
Yeah. Or is that sort of an unreasonable proposition, right? That like something here needs to change, right? Because you can convert time into money and money into time. So how are you managing the money going out? And then what financial pressure does that put on the amount of money that needs to come in? And again, is there a misalignment there? And is there some thinking to be done within yourself? And also, is there some discussion to be done with your spouse about both of these? Because I do think that as much as spending is, I guess every couple will decide for themselves, my personal opinion, and I think this is often helpful, is, just as spending needs to be a joint decision, I think also spending time, like that is also to some degree a joint decision, because how much you're available to be home does have an effect on your partner and on the family. So like, that does, for most partners, that feels like there needs to be some joint input on that.
Yeah, that's interesting because I'm liberal about the time that I take off to do stuff with my kids, whether there's never a play, there's never okay, I did miss kindergarten graduation because I absolutely screwed up my schedule and I was in the operating room that day. This is the second time I'm mentioning it on the show. because that's how guilty I feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
But really, like almost everything, like doctor's appointments too. I make a lot of the doctor's appointments if it's something that like, I
Mm-hmm.
really
Yeah.
want to be there for. But each time I do feel a little guilty because it's lost revenue. I'm in private practice. And so
Yeah.
I see that many fewer patients. My paycheck is that much smaller. And do we have that kind of margin? And so it's important to have, that type of handle on your finances. Is this okay or is it not okay? And if you're, you're in a thin margin, it's going to cause some stress. And if you're not, really, I think that's, to me, the definition of wealth, right? Like you have the ability to take that time when you need it. But that doesn't mean not doing things that you don't like, right? Work-life balance doesn't mean you have this balance or, how you choose to use your time such that you're always just doing things that are really important to you. Because there's this great quote from your book I loved that said, part of the cost of a good life is sometimes doing things you hate. And so I think it's important for the listeners to know, like, it doesn't mean that you're going to love everything that you do or it's going to have meaning to you, because there's some stuff that you just have to do. It's part of life. It sucks.
Yeah.
Suck it up and do it. It helps to hear someone else say it or reads, what someone else wrote. Part of the cost of a good life is sometimes doing things you hate.
Yeah. And that is absolutely true. Like it just is. To get the benefits of various parts of your life, like sometimes we do need to pay the price. And the advice I give here, and it's easy to say, but it's sort of like, don't suffer more than you have to, right? Do the thing you hate. Just get it done. Get it done as quickly as possible at whatever the quality is that will suffice. But we suffer more by kind of that sort of negative chewing in our head on it. That sort of like, this sucks. Why do I have to do it? This is so stupid. Whoever thought this was a good idea? This is so poorly designed. All of which could be 100% true, like absolutely accurate. But also the more you sort of like gnaw on that bone, it doesn't make the job go faster, it probably makes it go slower, but you definitely suffer more for it, right? So like, take a couple deep breaths, get it done, move on with your life.
Great advice. So the show we've been talking about so far, like the why of being more efficient, make sure that you're being intentional about using your time. So use it in such a way that aligns with your values. But sometimes that's still hard because like you said, sometimes it's doing stuff that we don't want to do, but we know is still important to accomplish a task, part of our job, whatever. And so sometimes we put stuff off. And then, as you said, it tortures us more. And so I'd like you to talk about this concept of temporal discounting, because I'd never heard of it before until your book.
Yeah. So this is a term from economics. There's a lot of psychology in economics. So basically, it's something that a reward or punishment that you get right away, you feel much more strongly. Something that comes later, we don't feel it as much. So anyone who took Psych 101 might remember the famous marshmallow experiment, where they took a bunch of cute kids and then they said, here is one marshmallow. You can have this one marshmallow right now. Or alternatively, if you give me a minute, I'm going to go down the hall, I'm going to get another marshmallow. And if you don't eat the first one, I'll give you another one. So you're going to get 2 marshmallows, which is a way better deal. You should totally wait for 2 marshmallows, right? Except, of course, what happens is some young kids do have that restraint and will wait for 2. And other kids, almost before the marshmallow touches the plate, they're already reaching out for it, right? And we can all laugh and be like, marshmallows, whatever. As adults, we do this all the time as well. So, you put something on a credit card and you don't pay it off. You're spending much more. Financially, a bad deal. But I get my TV right now, so okay, fine, let's do it. Or I'm going to watch one more episode because I really love this show. I can't wait to see what happens. But then all day tomorrow, I feel worse because I didn't get enough sleep. So like we discount concept rewards or punishments all the time.
Yes. Tomorrow me is going to suffer.
Yes.
Today me is going to enjoy that guy.
Good times.
I don't care about
Good
that
times.
Guy.
Yeah.
That guy will be fine. He'll have an extra cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Even though I know what happens every time. So yes, we've all been there.
Yeah. So like, just to give an example of this, if you said, okay, listeners, here's the deal. Like AI is not working. So I need someone to type up like a couple paragraph summary of this podcast episode. Just bang out a couple paragraphs. No big deal. I'll give you like $200. There's probably a fair number of people be like, sweet, $200. Yeah. I mean, that's fine. Like, what's that? 5 minutes? Sure. I'll rip out 2 paragraphs in 5 minutes for $200. But if you then said, okay, so yeah, here's the deal. Like I kind of spent a little too much on like Google ad dollars or something, and I don't really have the money right now. It's this weird budgetary thing. It's really better if you don't know any of the details. But bottom line is this, you're still getting $200, but it's going to be like on the first of the year, right? There's a lot of people who would feel like, wow, $200 in the first of the year, that doesn't feel like the same as $200 cash right now,
Yeah.
right? Because it doesn't, right? Psychologically, it does not feel that way, even though objectively it's exactly the same amount of money. So it's a little bit of irrationality that we all have. And it can lead us then to pick the things that feel better in this moment or avoid the things that feel worse, even though later we're going to pay a much bigger cost, right? So when we procrastinate, like that's a pretty good example, even though we know it's going to be even worse. You don't finish your notes now, today, and then you're doing them at the end of the week or God forbid the end of the month. And you're like, crap, what happened in that visit? I've got some scribbled notes, but I got to put it into the record officially. Like it takes you much longer. The note's not as good. It's not as helpful at the next appointment. So like it objectively, you should just do the notes now.
Yeah.
And yet we all have times when we don't.
Or the advice that I give on this show, which I've heard from my previous guests, which is before you see the next patient. But the problem is a lot of us got into medicine because we enjoy seeing our patients. It's enjoyable seeing the patients, and it's not enjoyable typing in the notes. And so there's this immediate reward of getting to go, and then we're delaying this inevitable. So, okay, so now we've got a clear definition for it. We understand why we do it. It's more satisfying to get that reward immediately than this abstract, distant future might not even be that distant. So how do we make either future rewards or consequences more tangible? If you like this podcast episode, you're going to love the other shows over at the Doctor Podcast Network. For instance, The Scalpel and Sword, hosted by Dr. Lee Nagendran Sharma, a previous guest on this show, who discussed conflict resolution. Covers topics like industrial psychology and personal development, ethics, and you guessed it, conflict resolution in healthcare. Check out Scalpel and Sword.
So let's go to the abstract, then let's get specific. So some of this is that because we know it's an unfair fight, that the future consequence doesn't feel as big as the present reward or punishment. So therefore, we need to intentionally kind of actively pump up the future consequence, right? Meaning to really sort of visualize and to really feel as much as you can in your belly, this is what future me is going to feel like. So if we take your example of staying up late, like I'll just have another cup of coffee. Yeah, but it's not 100% of a solution, right? It's still a longer day. I'm still kind of dragging. Like it takes me longer to get some things done. So I get out of the office a little bit later and then I don't get home.
I have trouble sleeping that night. Then I need more coffee the next day.
Right.
Comes a cycle, upsets my stomach a little bit. We don't need to go into details there, but everyone really gets,
Yeah, exactly. And to really imagine, here I am in this moment. How does that feel versus if I bite the bullet, turn off the TV, get a decent night of sleep? How does that day feel? Like, what does it feel like to walk into the office knowing, I'm good. Like, I feel I got a good night of sleep. Like, I'm ready to rock and roll versus walking into the office and you're like, oh man, it hasn't even started. I know this is going to be a long day. So like, really kind of comparing, contrasting what those two things feel like. And that I sometimes use this line that the wrong question in that moment is, do I want to turn off the TV? No, that's the terrible question. You don't. Of course you don't. It's a great show. Why would you not want to watch another episode? Also, by the way, let's be clear. Yeah, it absolutely requires some pause in a moment of intentional reflection. But let's also be clear, like, is one episode really one episode? Because sometimes one episode is not one episode. So there's that part of it too.
Right. And actually, Dr. Russell Ramsey, who we had on the show a couple of weeks ago, who's a friend of yours, actually, I think he wrote a foreword in the book.
I did.
Right. So what you're doing is you're getting in your own head, you're taking that pause, you're visualizing what it would feel like so that you don't do that thing that you want to do. Because we have a tendency to, as you said, this has happened before. We've been here before. We know what happens next and we expect it to be different. Actually, that's what Dr. Ramsey said, is that we've been in this situation before. And yet for some magical reason, we expect this time to be different. And
Yeah.
it never is. You do end up watching more than, it's not just the end of the episode. And so you
Yeah.
really have to feel what you're going to be in reality feeling the next day, not just finishing that one episode. So,
Yeah.
okay.
It's sort of like, yeah, remember that one time where I didn't do it? I think this is going to be like that. Like lightning is going to strike twice. I'm feeling
Yeah.
it. But of course, feeling lucky and being lucky are not, sadly, the same thing. So, yeah.
And we can't assume that this is going to be the time that lightning strikes because it happens so often and
Sure.
lightning strike does not.
Yeah.
But there's sometimes some situations where, as far as temporal discounting, right? Like we're doing what is immediately more satisfying at the consequence of something in the future. But sometimes it can be hard to figure that out because as physicians, we have a lot of urgent daily demands, right? We've got the patients
Yes.
in front of us, the chart notes to write, the patients to call back. But a lot of us also have like more long-term projects. And so how do we avoid always prioritizing the urgent, right? I mean, you're not going to make a patient wait so you can work on your PowerPoint, but it's a really fluid balance. And so how do we not just put off this other stuff indefinitely because the urgent is always there?
Yeah. So I think that part of this is really assessing kind of the bigger picture, right? In other words, is your caseload too big to actually get to these other things? Is that really the issue? Particularly if you get to things like you've got your regular appointment, but then there's always emergencies. There's always people who need to be seen urgently or something came up or whatever. So like, are you accounting enough for that? And I mean, I understand depending on where you work, you may not have control over your scheduling. You may be required to see a certain number of people. And so like that might actually be the problem, right? That there's just too many patients to manage and therefore isn't time to get to these other longer term projects. Or even if we take going back to the example of not reserving a couple minutes at the end of an appointment to do your notes. So then, they're all piling forward, right? So that may not necessarily where the story begins, right? Maybe the issue is you have too many appointments and they're not long enough for the severity of the patients you need to see or what needs to get done or what is trying to get done within the space of the appointment.
So then the issue might be one of expectation. Like you expect to, oh yeah, I'll take care of it in between patients, but there's never time. I'll do it at the end of the day when I'm done seeing patients, but then you got to get home because you have other responsibilities. And so you have these unrealistic expectations for how much time you really have in the day. And so actually, if you could put on your ADHD hat for a moment, because that time blindness is something that's common with ADHD, where they just don't, I'm still not sure what bucket I'm in. So what advice do you give to your patients who tend to do those types of things because of their time blindness?
Yeah. So, I mean, one bit of advice I would give, whether you have ADHD or you're just a busy physician, is can you even see what time it is? Like if you're in appointments and you can't easily see the time, what hope do you have to finish on time or to use the time? Well, I got to do this and then I got to do this and I have to make sure I got a couple of minutes for that. So can you actually see the time? Are you clear on what needs to get done when? And are there some things that can be done outside of the appointment or maybe done by somebody else? Or can you email something afterwards? Or like, are there ways to actually make that appointment time like a possibility that you would finish with enough time to get the notes done? So maybe there's sort of, if the end result is you're running out of time and can't do your notes, maybe if we rewind it, other places where some things are happening and other places that we can maybe intervene a little bit to make something a little bit more likely.
Got it. So have a little bit of forethought in terms of what your day is going to look like at the outset. And because our days can be somewhat predictable, it shouldn't be a surprise to you that it takes you X minutes to see a patient on average. Some people come in with earwax, takes 5 minutes to remove. And then the next patient will come in with sinusitis, dizziness, a neck mass, a thyroid mass, difficulty swallowing, and they're all completely unrelated. So it doesn't always take, but at the same time, we see large volumes of patients. We get a good idea of how long it takes you throughout your day to see an average number of patients and divide that by the number of patients you see. That's right. And then you can manage accordingly. So it does take some planning and forethought so that we can be realistic about how the day goes and stop being surprised when you can't squeeze stuff into the completely squeezed day.
Just to sort of highlight this part, there's a lot of things you're doing in the course of that appointment. I mean, obviously there's the clinical side of trying to figure out what's going on with this patient. So you're talking to them, you're examining them, you're looking at the notes, you're doing like whatever, like, oh, wait, what happened to those labs I ordered, right? So there's that. There's also the sort of the person part of it, right? Because this isn't a slab of meat you're examining, right? This is a person. So you're also maintaining a relationship and you're like, oh, what are your vacation plans and whatever, right? While you're doing the stuff you're doing. You're also then kind of mentally tracking time, like, what time is it? When did this appointment start? When does it end?
How
So
many
you're
more
thinking
people
about,
are in the waiting room
Yep.
right now?
Yep.
Who's checking in now? Is this person being sent for a hearing test like they're supposed to be?
Yeah, exactly. All of that, right? So you're tracking not only within the room, but what's happening outside of the room. And maybe even stuff like, I have to be out of here by 5:15 because there's a soccer game and I said I'd be there. And so you're tracking that. And also, God damn it, I think I'm supposed to get milk also. So there's a lot cognitively going on there. There's a lot of processing power getting used up there. So when everything is working well, that can be its own challenge. But if you didn't sleep well, if you're stressed out about life, if like you have an aging parent who's not doing well, or your relationship is struggling, all the things that we can sort of angst over and feel bad about, maybe you've got a terrible toothache and that's your knee is killing you, right?
Is there a
that
solution
also-
here somewhere? Because all you're doing is describing all the ways in which our job is hard. And
Yeah.
I'm hoping there's going to be something at the end that you're like, this is what you can do.
So like some of this is the human condition, but I do think kind of back to your point that you had made, right? It's about expectations and what is
Yeah.
reasonable to expect of myself. And I mean, I don't know, this is like super easy to say. It's not quite as easy, but like if you are in a job that is demanding that you just grind out a certain number of patients and it doesn't fit you in terms of your style and your preference and the way you like to practice and you just kind of hate it, I'm sure the money is good, or, well, I hope the money is good, but that might be a time to say like, look, do I really want to still do this? Or how long am I going to do this for? Or
Yeah.
how can I do this in a way that I still feel kind of true to myself about how I like to practice and patient care or whatever? There's a lot that goes on here, which is why I could write a book on productivity and not like a pamphlet. But you gave the example of the really complex patient. Is there, maybe this is a thing where you're like, okay, so here's the deal. This is more than we can cover in one appointment. So we're going to focus on this. And then
Yeah.
we're going to have to set up another appointment because I can't do a good job on all of these things at once.
Yeah. So sometimes you pick two, I pick one. What are
Yep.
the two
Yep.
most important things to you? And
Mhm.
sometimes what I'll say to a patient is, this really sounds like a lot. A lot of this stuff tends to be interrelated. And
Yep.
sometimes if we cover the most important stuff, the other stuff tends to get better, like as a downstream effect. So which of the two things are the most important to you that we cover? So we make sure we do a really good job with those things. And then when we follow up on those things, let's cover some of the other stuff that you're talking about now. So because
Yeah.
we want to make sure that everything gets the attention it deserves.
Yeah.
So there's language from the show that we recommend that people
Mhm.
use, that the patient feels like they're not being dismissed, that they are the priority, that they
Yeah.
are important and not. So there's one more thing that I want to get to before we go, because we've run out of time. And that is, we had an episode, it was actually one of my popular episodes on decluttering. And you had given advice on decluttering that I love. And I thought it was amazing advice, which was make decisions about what you're going to get rid of quickly. So if you're
Yeah.
decluttering, get rid of it, make a decision quickly. You're going to keep it or you're not going to keep it, because you can always convince yourself to keep it.
Yeah.
So just, are you or are you not? If you're not, throw it out, be done with it. Maybe
Move on.
put it in the trash that you can't, go in and reclaim it from. Make that
Yeah.
decision, be done with it, move on to the next thing. I just thought that was fantastic advice.
Yeah, because I mean, it's definitely a thing. And especially if you tend to be a bit sentimental, or you tend to be sort of an overthinker, like you can spend forever thinking about it. You don't get anything done. And sometimes the more you touch something, the more you think about it, the more you whatever over it, the more it's sort of like, oh, well, but maybe I'm going to get to this, so I'm going to keep it. Or maybe I'll need this, so I should keep it. And it can sometimes feel like sort of an admission of defeat, of like, I never got to this and I'm just getting rid of it. I am admitting failure if I throw it away. If I keep it, maybe I'll still get there. You know what I mean? And like, maybe, perhaps, but also there's a price in keeping things, because it either stresses you out and makes it harder. It's a less productive workspace, or it gets in the way of finding things when you need to find them, which is also a loss of productivity and time. So sometimes, whether it's clutter or emails or to-do lists or phone calls or texts or whatever, like sometimes you just need to dump stuff off, right? Like that might have been a fine idea at one point, might have been a terrible idea, but we'll give you benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was a fine idea when you said, yeah, I'm going to put that on my to-do list. But like time has moved on and it no longer makes the cut. It's still sort of a good idea, but it's not a good enough idea given my finite time and mental resources. So out it goes so that you can really focus on the things that actually matter the most.
I love how you took that from an issue of clutter and brought it back to our original topic, which was time management, because you're using the clutter of the to-do list, right? Like if I'm going through my to-do list and I'm thinking, do I really need to do it? Do I not? What does that say about how important this is? Because you always have other stuff you could be doing, right? Does this thing have enough value that it should be taking up my time, which is the question that you asked at the beginning of the episode. And if it takes you too long to come up with some rationalization of why you need to do it, then that says something about how unimportant it is. Get rid of it.
Sure. Right.
Great advice. That's what the comedians call a callback. They do a joke at the end that's a reference to what they do at the beginning. A fantastic way to close out the episode. Dr. Ari Tuckman, if people want to find you, if they want to find your book, where do they go online?
So adultadhdbook.com is my website, and the book is available all the places.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, all you do for your patients, and all this great advice.
My pleasure. I love talking about this stuff. I think it's so interesting, and I am really psyched that we had a chance to talk about it.
Thanks for listening. I have a favor to ask. You listened to the episode until the end, which means either you fell asleep or you really liked the episode. So please write us a 5-star review, take a screenshot, and email it to me so I can send you a quick guide on how to earn patient trust in 20 seconds or less. Email me at brad@physiciansguidetodoctoring.com and feel free to suggest a topic or guest. I take your requests seriously. The views expressed on this episode are those of the interviewer and the interviewee and do not represent the views of their employer or even their significant other. Even though the magic of podcasting makes it sound like I'm talking directly to you, this is not a doctor-patient relationship, and this is not medical advice, or financial advice, or legal advice, or really any advice. Thanks again for listening to Succeed in Medicine.